allegations of sexual misconduct by Antonio Brown. Through his lawyer, Brown denied the allegations. According to reports, Brown's initial accuser, who filed a civil lawsuit against the receiver, met with NFL investigators yesterday. The league has yet to release any official statement on the matter. When asked about how he was handling the AB situation, Bill Belichick said he was just focused on game planning for the Jets. We are now joined by USA Today NFL columnist Jarrett Bell. Good to have you with us this morning.
By the way, allow me to say I've worked with Jarrett for many, many years, known him for a long, long time. Nobody is more plugged in the National Football League than Jarrett Bell. So we appreciate your insight today.
Good to be back. Thanks for stopping by and joining us.
Good. It's good to have you because you have been covering this story closely. So, Jarrett, in your opinion, how many games do you think Antonio Brown will miss this season?
Besides the one game he has missed already.
Yeah.
I'll say 0 at this point. Yeah, at this point, based on what we know now. Okay. You can't take him off the field just because you think that these allegations may be, these heinous allegations, let's underscore that, may be true or not. Okay. And the reason that you really have to be careful if you are the NFL is because you can't set a precedent and start taking guys off the field just based on allegations. Right. And just think of the risk of that. If you're someone who has a beef with an NFL player or you're a spouse, a significant other, I mean, that is some dangerous territory. If there is no police involvement, if there's no criminal situation, you think about some of the other cases that have really stained the shield, if you will, in recent years. And when the NFL got involved with those investigations, it always kind of started from the fact that there was a criminal proceeding in place, either in progress or completed. We don't have that here. And I think that's what's really going to make it difficult for the NFL. Now, the investigation has begun, so what will they uncover? Where will that take the NFL, and will it result in any evidence? I think that is the key question. But as of right now, you can't just take him off because you think he's a jerk.
Yeah, speaking of dangerous territory, you wrote in your piece last week in USA Today that, I'm paraphrasing, the worst nightmare for the league would be to allow this to go on to a jury trial, and that the jury would find in favor of Brittany Taylor, and it would make you look bad, like you didn't react at all, and it would bring back up all the Ray Rice lack of reaction, right?
I think that's a risk for the NFL in terms of, unpacking Ray Rice and what you did when you knew what you knew. But the difficulty here is to really have some type of evidence. Now, if something comes out from this point, then you can react to that based on hard evidence. So the NFL is acting in terms of opening up an investigation. That's acting. That's some action. That is definitely taking a course of action to see what they can uncover.
I'll give you, they're not just sitting back saying, we don't want to get involved.
But there was an article that just came out, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, about a lady that was painting in Antonio Brown's home.
Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated article. And she said that she was downstairs painting, he came downstairs with just a hand towel over and he was naked. Do you believe the NFL would interview her and say this is a pattern of behavior that we deem, because that would that be considered conduct detrimental to the NFL?
Again, in that case, no criminal charges, but it does definitely add another layer when you're talking about who are we dealing with. Right. And I think the NFL, it behooves the NFL to reach out to the woman and to interview her and to get whatever information that it can get. And, there are other situations, people, like there's a chef or two, fitness people who have worked with him. I mean, they're definitely, as the Sports Illustrated article by Robert Klemko revealed and outlined, and some of these instances that were referred to in the article we've heard before.
Right. These are about unpaid debts.
Yeah, exactly. So the point being, yes, there does seem to be a pattern of behavior that is very troubling when you talk about people who have dealt with him. Now, when it gets to the level where there's sexual assault and this type of, behavior that is alleged, that is a bad look.
I think that's the issue. I don't think the NFL getting in the business of collecting debts. They're not a debt collection agency, Skip. So I don't really think they're going to care about that. But I think this young lady feeling that she felt uncomfortable he made her feel uncomfortable. I think, Jarrett, you mentioned, I think this leads to a pattern where people then will be, it's an easier jump to say from A to B, as opposed to saying, well, he was a jerk in Pittsburgh or he was a jerk in Oakland, and you make that huge leap to say, oh, yeah, I can see him possibly doing something like that. I think the pattern of behavior are closer between Miss Taylor and this lady if it can be proven.
And that's the big if, really, because, you know, allegations are one thing, being able to prove it, to stand up in, you know, with any charges, any legal charges. Because you can just imagine how the NFL Players Association and DeMaurice Smith, who, by the way, are in the midst of talking about an extension of the CBA. Yeah. And there's been all of this conversation for a number of years about Roger Goodell's power and how do you best, you know, implement some of these policies. And so I think obviously the NFLPA is watching this very closely because you can't just start taking people off the field just because you think that these allegations, as horrendous as they may be, are true or not. And, you know, one of the things that's been very difficult for me to kind of grasp and get my hands around in terms of trying to write about this issue is to understand, and it's not difficult to understand that people who are victims of alleged abuse have different ways of going about how they pursue whether or not that's criminal or civil or whatnot. And so it's very difficult to put yourself in the person's shoes and then say, well, I would do this or I would do that.
Everybody reacts differently to different situations.
And reportedly, she and Antonio's lawyers went back and forth for, quote unquote, several months trying to negotiate a settlement that they failed to reach because I'm assuming Antonio said, no, I don't want to settle this. It was a consensual relationship.
Or settle at the number.
Or at the number.
It reported that it was excess $2 million or excess of $2 million. So maybe he was willing to settle at a lesser number, but once you got into, you know, a couple of $1 million, he's like, nah, I'm out.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because typically when you have a civil case, you try to have some type of settlement before you get to that point. It's like, okay, if this doesn't happen,
because the burden of proof is a lot lower in a civil than a criminal.
Oh, no doubt about that. Yeah.
And then they bring in this lady, this article. Now they can really show a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, but again, you still have to have some type of proof if you're going to start, you know,
so let me ask you a question. It goes civil, and I think Skip touched on this. It goes to a civil trial. He gets convicted. He loses. Now what do you do?
Well, I think if that were to happen and a jury found him to be guilty.
Civilly?
Yeah, what's the word? Yeah, guilty, culpable, responsible, you know, all of these things, then, yeah, I think the NFL would have a different leg to stand on in terms of discipline, and I would fully expect that the league would do something if it got to that point.
Even though he's not criminally charged.
And that's a difficult thing, because if you look at the personal conduct policy, and that's something that, you know, really weighed on me as I looked at this, you know, deeper and deeper as last week proceeded. It's in the policy that says, here are the standards for putting people on the commissioner's exempt list. One, there has to be some type of criminal proceeding. Two, there has to be an investigation that the league has conducted. Now, there are things, and I know you talk about like Article 46, where you can say, well, there's conduct detrimental. And that could be a fuzzy gray area, because if you take that and you use that in this case, then there are probably other cases where you could use that same standard to say, well, let's take them off the field because of under Article 46. So you have to be very judicious in how you use those things. And I think that's one of the problems for the league. But again, in their personal conduct policy, when it talks about the commissioner's exempt list, it very plainly points out criminal proceeding and NFL investigation. So the investigation's underway. So maybe as we move forward, they'll have that.
But that's to put him on the commissioner's exempt list.
Exactly.
But the commissioner can step in and suspend him without putting him on the list.
Yeah, but I don't think that the league would want to have that precedent under these types of circumstances. And now if something were to surface, like we saw the Ray Rice situation just go to another level because of the Kareem Hunt situation. So that's different. So the evidence is the deal. I mean, we could think Antonio Brown is not a good character, but you've got to have some type of consistency in how you rule on these matters.
I can live with that.
What happened 2 years ago to my Dallas Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, not charged by the Fort Lauderdale Police Department or the Columbus, Ohio Police Department, who investigated both times. And The accuser was interviewed multiple times by Kia Roberts, then the director of investigations for the league, and she decided and concluded not credible enough. And she went to her boss, Lisa Friel, who then went to her boss, Roger Goodell, and said, not credible. And Roger still dropped the hammer for 6 games on Zeke. Was it because of the incident at the St. Patrick's Day parade where he pulled the woman's top down and it was caught on video, right? Was it a pattern of misbehavior off the field, bar fight incidents? Maybe, okay. But how different is that from what we're talking about right now? I'm not sure it's all that different.
Well, let me tell you how it's different, Skip. The Ezekiel Elliott case began when the NFL started its investigation. There was a police proceeding. There was evidence, there was interviews, there was a police report. We don't even have a police report in this Antonio Brown situation. So if you're the NFL and you're investigating this, and you're starting your investigation, hopefully if you're investigating, you find out more than the police did, more than that's there. But that's your starting point. In this case, you're starting from ground zero.
She started civilly instead of criminally.
But there's not even a police report.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
There's these allegations.
Right. If she'd have started, went to the police and said this happened, then the police would have had no choice but to start an investigation. But she started the other way. She filed in federal court with a civil lawsuit. But the investigation, I think this happened in Florida, they're saying they're willing to, listen to whatever she may have to offer and then move along from there.
Yeah, and the big question in my mind is, why are we taking this course of action first as opposed to, going to law enforcement?
Right.
Because, and that's why, I really qualify it by saying I may not totally understand what victims go through and how they arrive at their decisions, but it just strikes me as a situation where if these things did happen, A, why do you go back a couple times? And B, why not get law enforcement involved?
And it's hard to know. I don't think any of us can put ourselves in that situation and why she's handling it. But we do need to have both sides of the story. And this is just the beginning. So, Jarrett, thank you for your insight. Appreciate you being here.
Okay.
Always good to have you with us.
Good to see you. Okay, thanks.
We did have some breaking news earlier about the Giants. We are moving on to Daniel Jones. What does that mean for Eli? We'll talk about it next.